Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time long before modern science took the reins of our health and well-being. Picture yourself in the dusty streets of a small medieval village, the air thick with the smell of earth and herbs, where healing wasn't found in a shiny pill bottle, but in the very plants growing in your backyard. Now let's be real. You probably won't survive this journey if you're not at least a bit adventurous in your imagination. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to post your location and the time in your world right now, because we're about to time travel, and I want to know where you're starting from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins not in the grandeur of Renaissance cities, but rather in the bleak shadows of the Dark Ages. This was a time when knowledge was often locked away in the hands of a few, guarded by the church and passed down through whispered secrets. But something extraordinary was about to happen, something quiet, yet monumental right beneath the surface. You see, as much as history books like to paint the Dark Ages as a time of stagnation, the reality is that there were flickers of brilliance hidden in the cracks, waiting for the Renaissance to burst forth and ignite them. One of the most remarkable hidden revolutions was in herbalism, a practice so essential to life that it survived in every corner of the medieval world, often passed down in secret. What would soon evolve into the bold exploration of science in the Renaissance was, in its earliest form, the preservation and transmission of ancient herbal knowledge, often by those who had little access to the formal institutions of learning monks, nuns, and local healers. Their knowledge was the lifeblood of the everyday folk, offering remedies to ailments that, if untreated, could lead to death. Yet herbalism was not just about surviving. It was about a relationship with nature that was sacred and intimate, cultivated through centuries of trial and error. Historians still argue whether the Dark Ages stifled all progress, or if, instead, it set the stage for a quiet, underground renaissance in healing. While some knowledge may have been lost to time, much of it endured through the persistence of those who understood the quiet power of plants. The herbalists weren't just passively waiting for a scientific breakthrough to come knocking, they were actively experimenting with nature's pharmacy. You could walk into a humble village and encounter an herbalista person, armed not with a white coat, but with a simple bag of roots, leaves, and seeds, each with a secret life of its own. They were healers by necessity, but also by curiosity, driven by an ancient and unspoken desire to understand the alchemy of life itself. And in the monasteries, which were among the few places where learning was kept alive, monks were scribbling down the oldest texts, preserving the knowledge of herbs passed down from the Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians. They didn't just record recipes for potions and tinctures. They became the keepers of an entire world of plant-based knowledge, passive stewards who helped ensure the next wave of herbal knowledge wasn't lost forever. You see, when the Renaissance began to break through the thick fog of medieval life, it didn't do so by tearing everything down. It did so by building on what had quietly been preserved. The knowledge that had been cultivated in secrecy and quiet persistence was about to see the light of day. The early Renaissance wasn't just a burst of intellectual flame. It was a slow smoldering that began to catch fire in unexpected places, like a fire in a hidden grove where no one expected to see flames. In the quiet corners of the world, among those who worked with their hands and who lived on the fringes of the great cities, there was a growing sense that something bigger was about to unfold. Herbalists and apothecaries, though still often regarded with skepticism and suspicion, were beginning to ask questions that would soon resonate far beyond their humble walls. They were the early revolutionaries, the ones who dared to push against the confines of tradition. The Renaissance, which is typically remembered for its artistic and philosophical explosions, was also a time of profound change in medicine. Now, we often associate great advancements in science with figures like Galileo or Copernicus. But herbalists, those humble practitioners who were constantly tending their gardens and collecting medicinal plants, were doing their part. Too, they were experimenting not just with plants, but with the idea that human beings could and should control their health in ways that were not always dictated by divine will. To them, the world was not simply a series of punishments to be endured. It was a place of vast potential, where even the simplest of herbs held the key to longevity and vitality. And at the heart of this quiet revolution were the texts that had been handed down from generation to generation. Often stored in dusty library shelves or passed between friends and colleagues in a secretive manner, the manuscripts detailing the uses of plants, their healing properties, their connections to the body, were the earliest sparks of what would later become a fully fledged movement in the sciences. These books, often handwritten, were prized possessions, hoarded by those who understood their worth in a world where knowledge was power and healing could mean the difference between life and death. Yet, not all herbalists were simply keepers of old knowledge. As the Renaissance gained steam, new ideas began to emerge, especially as the era ushered in the development of experimental science. The old ways of simply following tradition and handing down knowledge without question started to shift, thanks in part to the broader cultural shifts. The exploration of new lands brought new plants into European gardens, and new methods of gathering and documenting knowledge began to emerge. These herbalists were beginning to see themselves as not just caretakers of ancient wisdom, but as pioneers in their own right. By the time the printing press came into play, the movement had grown exponentially. The ability to print herbals and medical texts meant that the knowledge wasn't just for the privileged few, but for anyone who could read. You no longer had to rely on an oral tradition or handwritten copies of manuscripts. The written word, once reserved for the clergy, was now available to a much wider audience. This democratization of knowledge was a critical turning point, not just for herbalism, but for science as a whole. It meant that a common person in any European village could open a book and learn how to use local herbs to treat the illnesses that plagued them. Historians still argue whether the invention of the printing press, a tool often credited with the explosion of Renaissance thought, was truly as revolutionary as we think. Some claim that it was the natural extension of an age that was already ripe for change. But one thing is clear: the printing press transformed the landscape of knowledge and allowed herbalism to spread far beyond the cloisters of monks and the private libraries of the wealthy. The humble herbalists, who had once worked quietly in their gardens, now found themselves at the center of a burgeoning medical revolution. So as we trace the roots of this quiet revolution in herbalism, we begin to see that the transformation was not immediate, nor was it loud. It was a slow, steady force, one that began in the shadows, but grew stronger and more powerful with each passing year. And in the heart of the Renaissance, herbalism, once dismissed as mere superstition or old wives' tales, was beginning to take on a new role. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. It was about taking control of one's health in ways that had never been imagined before. And it was about pushing against the boundaries that had been set by centuries of tradition. As the next section unfolds, we will see how the monasteries, their libraries full of ancient texts, and their gardens filled with healing herbs, became the unlikely incubators for a new wave of herbal knowledge that would eventually take root in every aspect of Renaissance life. Now, let's imagine it's the 15th century, and you find yourself walking through the quiet corridors of a monastery tucked away on a hilltop. Somewhere in the heart of Europe, the cool stone walls seem to absorb the whispers of monks at work, their robes sweeping across the floor as they move from one task to the next. It's peaceful here, almost too peaceful. And yet there is a hum beneath the surface, a hum that speaks to the secrets these walls hold. This is where the knowledge of the ancients is safeguarded, where centuries of wisdom are passed down through dusty books and faded manuscripts. Among these manuscripts, hidden from the bustling cities and courts, lies the knowledge of plants of herbs that heal and restore, secret remedies kept alive by those who believe in the quiet power of nature. Monasteries, once considered centers of devotion, became unlikely but crucial hubs of intellectual and practical knowledge in the early Renaissance. The monks who lived within these sacred walls were not just religious figures, they were also the keepers of the past. In the face of widespread illiteracy, they were often the only ones capable of reading and transcribing ancient texts. Many of these manuscripts were written in Greek and Latin, inherited from the great civilizations of Egypt, Greece, and Rome. But it wasn't just theology and philosophy that occupied their time. It was also the study of the natural world. Many of these monasteries had meticulously cultivated gardens full of medicinal plants, grown for the use of both the monks and the local community. These monks were herbalists in their own right, carrying on the work of their Roman and Greek predecessors, whose writings had often been the only surviving remnants of herbal knowledge. Some of the most important texts they transcribed were the De Materia Medica by Dioscorides and the Canon of Medicine by Avicenna, both of which contain detailed descriptions of medicinal plants and their uses. But what these monks did differently was add their own observations and experiments to these ancient texts. They didn't just copy, they improved. They took notes on the plants they grew in their gardens, the weather patterns that influenced their growth, and the specific ways in which different herbs could be combined to create more potent remedies. The work of these monks wasn't flashy, nor was it publicly celebrated. Their discoveries were often confined to the walls of their monasteries, and were shared only with a small circle of fellow scholars. In this way, the Renaissance herbalists began their work in the shadows. But they were laying the foundation for something much larger, quiet revolution in the world of medicine. What's fascinating, however, is the role these monasteries played in preserving a particular form of herbal knowledge that had been passed down through various civilizations. The ancient Greeks, for instance, studied plants not just for their medicinal properties, but also for their symbolic meanings. Herbs like basil, lavender, and sage were seen as not only healing plants, but also as spiritual symbols associated with gods, rituals, and the divine. The Romans, following suit, documented their findings in great detail, laying the groundwork for the herbal practices that would later emerge in the Renaissance. Yet, when the ancient libraries of Rome were destroyed and many of the texts were lost to time, it was these small, often remote monasteries that took on the responsibility of preserving what was left. Historians still argue whether the preservation of herbal knowledge in the monasteries was a product of necessity or merely chance. Some scholars believe that it was simply a matter of survival. Herbs were essential to everyday life, and the monks, ever practical, knew that they had to preserve this knowledge in order to ensure their own well-being and the well-being of their communities. Others suggest that there was a deeper motivation at play, rooted in the spiritual beliefs of the time. After all, the act of healing through plants was deeply intertwined with the notion of divine will. Many of the herbs cultivated in the monastery gardens were believed to have been created by God for the express purpose of healing the sick, making the cultivation and use of these plants a sacred act. As the Renaissance began to unfold, the significance of herbalism was starting to shift. While the monasteries remained important centers for learning, they were not the only places where herbalism was being cultivated. Across Europe, small towns and villages were home to local herbalists, who carried with them a wealth of knowledge that had been passed down through generations. These herbalists didn't have the luxury of large gardens or libraries. They had to rely on the wisdom of nature itself. Learning how to identify and use plants by trial and error, the way these herbalists worked was vastly different from the scholars in the monasteries. They didn't have access to formal education, but they had something far more valuable: experience. They knew which plants could be used to treat wounds, which ones could soothe a cough, and which ones had the power to calm an anxious mind. They would pass their knowledge on to their apprentices, many of whom were young women who had learned from their mothers and grandmothers. It wasn't long before this knowledge started to spread, reaching beyond the confines of local villages and making its way into the cities. This shift marked the beginning of the larger Renaissance herbal movement, where the boundaries between common folk and learned scholars started to blur. In the coming decades, herbalism would no longer be something confined to monasteries or rural communities. It would become part of the broader intellectual landscape of the Renaissance. As scholars began to embrace it as a legitimate field of study, the rise of the printing press played a huge role in this transformation. For centuries, herbal knowledge had been passed along orally or in handwritten manuscripts. It was slow and labor-intensive work, and knowledge remained locked away in the hands of the few. But with the advent of the printing press, books could be mass-produced, and the knowledge contained within them could be shared with anyone who could read. This was a game-changer for herbalism.
How subtly?
The work of herbalists who had once been regarded as mere folk healers was being legitimized and spread to a wider audience. Historians still debate whether the rise of printing actually democratized knowledge or whether it merely gave more power to the elite. But what is undeniable is that it sparked a profound shift in the way people thought about medicine. Texts on herbs and healing could now be distributed widely. People across Europe could access the knowledge that had once been confined to the monasteries or the small villages. The herbalists, once limited to their local communities, now had the potential to reach the entire continent. This expansion of herbal knowledge was a direct result of the quiet work being done in monasteries and among the folk healers. Without their careful documentation and experimentation, much of the ancient knowledge of plants would have been lost to time. The Renaissance herbalists, in their quiet, steady way, helped plant the seeds for a revolution in medicine, one that would later give rise to modern pharmacology. But as the Renaissance progressed, these quiet herbalists would face new challenges. The rise of professional medicine and the increasing influence of universities would soon overshadow their humble work. In the next section, we'll explore how these early herbalists began to clash with the emerging world of professional physicians, and how the line between healer and scientist began to blur. It's now the late 15th century, and you can feel the buzz of intellectual activity in the air. The Renaissance has taken full swing, and the streets of Florence, Venice, and Paris are alive with the energy of humanism. Everywhere you look, there's a thirst for knowledge, for discovery, for understanding the world in new and innovative ways. Art, philosophy, and science have exploded into new realms, but amidst this intellectual whirlwind, there's something quieter happening, a transformation in the field of herbalism. Imagine yourself stepping into one of the bustling markets of Renaissance Europe. As you weave through the stalls, you see vendors selling herbs that smell of earth and sunshine, each bundle promising healing powers. The air is thick with the scent of rosemary, thyme, and lavender, and in the distance, hear the sound of a hawker shouting about the benefits of a certain root that can cure fever. But behind the busy chatter of these markets lies a system that's a little more structured and professional than you might expect, an apprenticeship system that ensures the future of herbal knowledge will be in capable hands. Herbalism, for all its quiet and humble beginnings, was not a field that could be left to chance. Much like any other craft or trade of the time, the knowledge and practice of healing through plants was passed down through a rigorous apprenticeship system. This system ensured that the valuable, often secretive knowledge of plants and their uses was carefully guarded and preserved. You can picture this system as one of mutual respect between master and apprentice, a relationship built on trust and experience. Apprentices, often young people eager to learn, would spend years under the tutelage of experienced herbalists, gaining hands-on knowledge that could not be acquired from books alone. As in other fields of Renaissance craftsmanship, this was a time of serious training. Apprentices didn't simply read about herbs, they grew them, harvested them, and experimented with them, often. Under the watchful eye of a seasoned herbalist, the master would pass on secrets and remedies that had been carefully cultivated over years, teaching the apprentice not just how to use herbs, but when and why they worked. The apprenticeship system wasn't limited to just herbalism. It was a common structure in many Renaissance trades, from blacksmithing to painting, and it reflected the growing interest in professionalizing various forms of knowledge. However, it also spoke to the evolution of herbalism as a legitimate field. In the early years of the Renaissance, herbal knowledge was often relegated to the realm of folk healing, considered by many to be, at best, a quaint tradition, at worst a form of superstition. But as the Renaissance progressed, herbalists and their apprentices began to gain more recognition for their expertise. They started to take part in the growing intellectual currents of the day, participating in academic circles, and engaging with the burgeoning world of professional science. Historians still debate the exact nature of the Renaissance's impact on herbalism. Was it a true professionalization of the field, or merely a gradual shift in perception? Was herbalism becoming more scientific, or was it simply adapting to the changing times? One thing is for certain, however, the apprenticeship system was at the heart of this transformation. It was through these carefully cultivated relationships that herbal knowledge was passed on with precision, ensuring that the practices would continue to evolve as society did. But let's not get too carried away with the professionalization just yet, because the world of the Renaissance herbalist wasn't all formal and academic. In fact, for every university-trained apothecary, there was an earthy, down-to-earth village herbalist who was just as important in shaping the future of medicine. These folk healers were still the lifeblood of rural Europe, especially in the early Renaissance, when universities and academic institutions hadn't fully grasped the significance of herbalism. These herbalists worked in close contact with nature. Their knowledge wasn't academic in the traditional sense. It was based on years of observation and hands-on experience. They knew the land, the seasons, and the plants, and they could mix remedies without so much as a second thought. This kind of practical, experiential knowledge was just as valuable as what was being written down in academic treatises. The academic world had its own role to play, of course, but the practical healers were the ones who were directly connected to the people, and their work often transcended the formal world of academia. But with the rise of formal education, especially with universities like those in Padua and Bologna, the perception of herbalism was starting to shift. While the folk healers continued to work their magic in rural homes and markets, it was clear that the landscape of medicine was changing. It was becoming more formalized, more structured, and increasingly dominated by individuals with university degrees. These individuals, who were known as apothecaries, began to push back against the folk herbalists, arguing that their work was too unscientific to be taken seriously. At this juncture, we see an interesting tension developing between the folk herbalists and the academic apothecaries. On one side, you have the old guard, the rural healers, who have a deep, unshakable connection to nature and their remedies. On the other side, you have the emerging class of professional apothecaries, trained in the universities, who see themselves as the legitimate heirs to the tradition of healing. The apothecaries, who were increasingly trained in botany, chemistry, and medicine, sought to distance themselves from the superstitions of folk healing. They viewed themselves as the future of medicine, and herbalism, in their eyes, was a part of that future, but only if it could be purified from its associations with mysticism and unproven traditions. Historians still argue whether this division between apothecaries and folk healers was a natural evolution of medicine or a conflict driven by the desire for professionalization and prestige. Some argue that apothecaries were simply trying to elevate their practice and give it the legitimacy it deserved. Others believe that it was a way for the academic world to assert control over a practice that had, for centuries, been in the hands of the common folk. Either way, it was clear that the rise of the apothecaries marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of herbalism. As the Renaissance wore on, the conflict between these two groups would only deepen. The apothecaries, with their scientific training, began to take over the market, leaving the folk healers to retreat to the margins of society. But in doing so, they also began to alter the nature of herbalism itself. The old ways, those passed down through generations of healers, were starting to be replaced with new ways. Methods that relied more heavily on the scientific method than on intuition or tradition. And with that shift, herbalism began to lose its connection to the land and the people in a way that many of the early herbalists had never intended. However, the apothecaries were not the sole drivers of change. The broader cultural and intellectual currents of the Renaissance were pushing for a reevaluation of the very nature of medicine and healing. The growing interest in anatomy, chemistry, and the natural sciences provided a new lens through which herbalism could be understood. As the Renaissance progressed, herbalism would begin to emerge as a more legitimate and systematic science. The work of herbalists, now aligned with the discoveries of other Renaissance scientists, would form the foundation for the modern study of pharmacology. In the next section, we'll explore the printing press's revolutionary impact on herbalism and how it dramatically shifted the way knowledge was shared, stored, and studied. We'll see how this innovation made herbalism accessible to the masses, ensuring that the quiet revolution of the Renaissance herbalists would not be contained within the walls of academic institutions or rural cottages. It would spread far and wide, igniting minds across Europe. As you settle in for the next leg of this journey, imagine walking into a Renaissance print shop. The air is thick with the smell of ink and freshly printed paper. The hum of the presses filling the room as workers move swiftly to turn sheets of vellum into pages that will soon change the world. Every press of the lever seems to echo in the quiet chambers of intellectual history. It's the mid-15th century, and the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg is slowly starting to spread across Europe, revolutionizing the way knowledge is shared. This innovation is about to create a massive shift, not just in how books are made, but in how herbalism and medicine, in general, is understood, practiced, and shared. For centuries, knowledge had been passed down slowly and painstakingly by hand. Monks meticulously copied texts one letter at a time, by candlelight, ensuring that the knowledge of the ancient world was preserved. But the printing press, with its ability to mass-produce books, dramatically accelerated the spread of information. No longer did knowledge have to be hoarded in monasteries or confined to the hands of a few learned scholars. Instead, books could be printed and distributed to anyone who could read, spreading ideas at an unprecedented rate. At the heart of this shift was the printed herbal. Before the press, Herbal's books detailing the uses and properties of medicinal plants had been rare and often copied by hand in small quantities. But with the advent of the printing press, these texts were suddenly available to anyone with access to a printer. The first printed herbals began to appear in the 1460s, and they were wildly popular. They were the gateway through which herbal knowledge, once confined to an elite class of scholars, could now reach the common people. One of the first major herbals to be printed was De Materia Medica by Dioscorides, a text that had been revered for centuries and was seen as the foundation of Western herbalism. Soon as this text was printed, it spread like wildfire. It was no longer the exclusive property of wealthy individuals or the clergy. It was now available to anyone who could afford a copy. The book was filled with illustrations of plants and detailed instructions on how to prepare them, making it an invaluable resource for herbalists and apothecaries alike. But the spread of this knowledge did more than just make herbs accessible to a broader audience. It helped to shift the perception of herbalism itself. No longer was it seen as just folk knowledge or superstition. It was now part of a growing body of scientific understanding. Historians still argue whether the early printed herbals were truly scientific, or whether they were simply the products of an era of growing curiosity. Some scholars contend that these texts represented an important step forward in the scientific understanding of plants and medicine, while others suggest that the rise of printing merely accelerated the spread of unreliable or outdated knowledge. The truth, as is often the case, lies somewhere in between. These early herbals were groundbreaking in that they allowed people to access plant knowledge that had previously been restricted. But they also contained inaccuracies and myths that were rooted in the past. Still, the key was that they were accessible, and they were being read by more than just a select few. With the printing press, the world of herbalism expanded far beyond the confines of the small apothecary shops and monastery gardens. It became a public, almost democratic pursuit. For the first time, anyone could learn about the medicinal properties of plants. This is where the quiet revolution of Renaissance herbalism truly begins to take shape. Herbalists, once isolated, began to share their knowledge in ways that were unprecedented. Texts were translated into different languages and spread across borders, allowing practitioners in different countries to build upon each other's work. This exchange of ideas helped herbalism become a more structured scientific field. As herbalists began to test and refine the information they had inherited, but the printing press didn't just make knowledge more accessible, it also gave rise to a new kind of herbalist. No longer did one have to rely solely on apprenticeship and oral tradition. The printed herbal texts allowed for a more standardized approach to herbal medicine, as practitioners could now compare their findings with those of others and refine their techniques accordingly. For the first time, herbalism was becoming a more cohesive and structured discipline, with knowledge being shared and tested on a larger scale than ever before. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate the gravity of this transformation. The printing press wasn't just a tool for spreading the works of poets and philosophers. It was a tool for revolutionizing the way people understood their bodies, their health, and their relationship to the natural world. With the press, the scientific method could take root in a way that had never been possible before. Herbalists no longer had to rely on ancient texts or secretive traditions. They could now test their remedies, document their findings, and share them with others. This is where we see the first seeds of modern pharmacology being planted. But not everyone was thrilled with this new age of print. The rise of the printing press also meant the rise of competition. As herbal texts were printed and distributed, they were being read by more than just the established class of apothecaries. Now, anyone could claim to be an expert in herbal medicine, whether or not they had the necessary knowledge or experience. The printing press made it easier for misinformation to spread, and as herbal knowledge became more widely accessible, it also became more fragmented. This posed a challenge for professional herbalists, who had long relied on their specialized knowledge and training to distinguish themselves from the untrained folk healers. Historians still debate whether the democratization of knowledge through printing ultimately weakened the profession of herbalism or strengthened it. Some argue that influx of new practitioners, armed with printed texts but lacking the hands-on experience of their elders, diluted the field and led to the spread of ineffective or even dangerous remedies. Others suggest that the increased accessibility of herbal knowledge helped elevate the practice, making it more professional and ultimately more reliable. The rise of the printing press was a double-edged sword. It spread valuable knowledge to a wider audience, but it also created challenges in terms of quality control and standardization. However, one thing is certain: the printing press played a pivotal role in the Renaissance herbal revolution. It allowed for the rapid spread of ideas, the standardization of knowledge, and the birth of a more scientific approach to herbalism. By the end of the 15th century, herbals were widely available. The practice of using plants for healing had become an integral part of the Renaissance worldview. Now let's take a step back and reflect on the lasting impact of this transformation. The rise of the printing press marked a key turning point in the history of herbalism. It helped elevate the practice from its roots in folk tradition to something that was widely accepted and respected. But more importantly, it set the stage for the development of modern medicine. As the scientific method began to take hold in the world of herbalism, the printed herbals that circulated throughout Europe would go on to influence countless generations of herbalists, doctors, and scientists, shaping the way we approach medicine even today. In the next section, we will delve into the overlooked but crucial role that women played in the Renaissance herbal revolution. While history often focuses on the male figures of the period, women were instrumental in the spread of herbal knowledge and their contributions deserve to be recognized. Let's step into a different kind of space now. Imagine yourself in a small, dimly lit room in a bustling Renaissance city. The room is filled with the scent of drying herbs and the faint crackle of a fire in the hearth. On the shelves, jars and bottles, each filled with a carefully prepared remedy, stand in orderly rows. In the corner, a woman, not much older than you, works silently. Her hands moving with the practiced skill of someone who has spent years learning the art of healing through herbs. This is no ordinary place. It is the workshop of a female herbalist, whose knowledge of plants and their medicinal properties is just as profound, if not more so, than the learned men in the universities. For centuries, history has largely sidelined the contributions of women in science and medicine, and the Renaissance herbal revolution is no exception. Yet, as we dig deeper, we uncover a hidden thread of women who played critical roles in the development and spread of herbal knowledge. They were healers, apothecaries, and herbalists who worked quietly, often behind the scenes. But their contributions were no less important than those of their male counterparts. It is time to bring these women into the light, to acknowledge their invaluable roles in the herbal revolution that took place during the Renaissance. Historically, women have been the primary caregivers and healers within their families and communities. From the early Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, women were the keepers of many household remedies, learning the healing properties of plants from their mothers, grandmothers, and aunts. These women may not have received formal education or recognition, but their knowledge of herbs, passed down through generations, was vital to the well-being of their families. Many of the early herbalists were women who worked in their homes, growing and preparing remedies for everyday ailments. In fact, it's likely that the majority of people who sought treatment from herbalists during this time period were visiting the homes of women who were known for their healing expertise. As the Renaissance took hold, the role of women in the realm of herbalism began to shift. With the rise of universities and the professionalization of medicine, there was a growing tendency to view herbalism through a more scientific lens. But this shift didn't completely exclude women from the field. In fact, many women who had been practicing herbalism for years began to play a more visible role in the evolving world of Renaissance medicine. One of the most notable examples of this was the work of women in the courts of noble families, where they served as royal healers and apothecaries. These women, often educated by fathers or husbands who were physicians, gained considerable influence in the medical world and were able to contribute their knowledge to a much larger audience. Historians still argue about how much access these women truly had to formal scientific education. Given the limited opportunities for women in the Renaissance, many of these women didn't have access to the academic training that their male counterparts received, but they were still highly skilled in their field. Some were self-taught, while others were trained by male family members or mentors. What is most significant is that, despite the societal barriers placed in their way, these women played a pivotal role in the transmission and development of herbal knowledge. One example of such a woman is the famous 16th century herbalist and physician, Katharina von Gietz, who was well regarded in both Germany and Italy for her knowledge of herbal remedies. She was a pioneer in the study of botany, and her work was influential in both the medical and botanical communities. However, women like Katharina were exceptions. The vast majority of female herbalists worked in the shadows, quietly caring for their communities, and their names have often been lost to history. But the rise of the printed herbal revolution, which we discussed earlier, helped give these women more visibility. As books and herbals began to circulate, more women were able to contribute to the growing body of knowledge. Women were not just keepers of tradition, they were innovators, experimenting with different methods of preparation and application. Through their apprenticeships, many women honed their skills and shared their findings with others. In this sense, the printing press wasn't just a tool for spreading knowledge, it was a tool that gave women in the field a louder voice. However, despite the advances made by women herbalists, there were still societal pressures that restricted their recognition. It's important to remember that this period was still deeply patriarchal, and the contributions of women were often undervalued. The men in power, including physicians, were quick to dismiss the work of women, labeling them as mere wise women or witches. These labels were used to delegitimize their practices and ensure that male-dominated medical institutions maintained control over healthcare. Yet this did not deter many of these women. In fact, many of them thrived in spite of the challenges they faced. Their knowledge of herbs and healing was not limited to the physical realm. Many of them were also sought after for their spiritual guidance, as their remedies were often intertwined with beliefs about the body's relationship to the soul and the divine. This holistic approach to healing was part of what made their practice so effective. The Renaissance was a time of shifting intellectual currents, and the blending of scientific and spiritual knowledge was a hallmark of the period. Women herbalists played a significant role in this blending, creating remedies that were as much about the mind and spirit as they were about the body. Historians still argue whether this dual approach to healing combining both the physical and spiritual is one of the reasons women's herbalism was often dismissed by the emerging professional medical community. Some believe that the male-dominated medical world sought to distance itself from the mystical and spiritual aspects of healing, which are often associated with women's practices. Others argue that it was simply a matter of gender. Male physicians sought to control the medical profession and ensure that it was perceived as a legitimate and scientific discipline, free from the superstitions associated with female herbalism. Regardless of the reasons, the thing is clear. The contributions of women herbalists were vital to the development of Renaissance herbalism. These women were not just passive recipients of knowledge. They were active participants in the creation and transmission of herbal practices, whether working in their gardens, mixing tinctures, or writing their own herbals. Women were at the forefront of the quiet revolution in herbal medicine. The legacy of these women can still be felt today. Many of the herbal remedies they perfected continue to be used in modern herbal medicine. For example, the use of lavender for relaxation, rosemary for memory, and chamomile for sleep can all trace their roots back to these early Renaissance herbalists. The knowledge they passed down, often through oral traditions and handwritten manuscripts, formed the foundation for much of the herbal medicine we use today. As we move forward, we'll explore how these women alongside their male counterparts began to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and emerging science, laying the groundwork for the professionalization of herbalism and the eventual rise of modern pharmacology. In the next section, we will delve into how the Renaissance herbalists, both male and female, began to merge the practical, folk knowledge they had inherited with the scientific discoveries of the time. This is where herbalism starts to shed its old mystical skin and take on a more systematic, evidence-based approach to healing. As we settle deeper into the fabric of the Renaissance, we begin to see how herbalism, once rooted in folk traditions and spiritual healing, began to evolve into something more scientific and systematic. This was a time when old paradigms were crumbling and new ways of understanding the world were taking their place. The once mystical and mysterious power of herbs was beginning to be understood through the lens of science, observed, tested, and codified. The key to this transformation lay in the growing acceptance of empirical evidence, trial and error, and the systematic approach that was beginning to dominate the intellectual world. And it was in this context that the Renaissance herbalists, with their hands-on knowledge and growing curiosity, became the bridge between the ancient world and the future of medicine. You find yourself walking through the streets of Padua, Italy, where the university's vibrant intellectual climate is beginning to churn with new ideas. The smell of ink and parchment, and you can hear the sound of students discussing the latest scientific discoveries as they make their way to the lecture halls. Here, in this bustling city, a new generation of thinkers is emerging, scientists, philosophers, and healers who are eager to unravel the mysteries of the natural world. The Renaissance wasn't just an explosion of art and culture, it was also a time of intellectual upheaval. The old ways of thinking were being challenged and new ideas about science, the human body, and the natural world were emerging. Herbalism, which had long been seen as a folk practice, was now beginning to intersect with the growing world of Renaissance science. This was a time when the foundations of modern medicine were being laid, and herbalists, whether formally trained or self-taught, were becoming active participants in this revolution. For centuries, herbalism had been built on the teachings of ancient text works by Galen, Dioscorides, and Hippocrates, passed down through the ages. These texts had been preserved by monks in their monasteries and used as the foundation for the healing practices of the time. But as Renaissance scholars began to question the ancient wisdom, a new approach to herbalism began to emerge, one based on observation, experimentation, and the scientific method. While the knowledge of plants and their medicinal uses was still heavily influenced by these ancient texts, Renaissance herbalists were no longer content to simply repeat what they had read. They began to ask questions, test remedies, and experiment with new ways of preparing and combining herbs. Historians still argue whether this shift in approach was truly a scientific revolution for herbalism, or whether it was simply a natural evolution. Was this just herbalism adapting to the intellectual currents of the time? Or was it the beginning of something much bigger, the rise of modern pharmacology? What's certain is that the new approach to herbalism was rooted in the desire for empirical evidence. No longer were herbalists willing to rely solely on tradition. They wanted to see results and to prove that their remedies worked. And it was this commitment to experimentation and testing that began to set Renaissance herbalism apart from its more mystical predecessors. Take, for example, the work of Leonhard Fuchs, a German botanist and herbalist who became one of the most influential figures in Renaissance herbalism. Fuchs' De Historia Stirpium, published in 1542, was one of the first printed herbals to take a systematic, scientific approach to plant medicine. Rather than simply repeating the ancient texts, Fuchs sought to observe the plants in their natural environment and to document their properties based on his own first-hand experiences. His work was based not only on the writings of ancient authorities, but also on the actual study of plants in nature, a practice that would become central to modern botany and pharmacology. Fuchs' work was groundbreaking in many ways. For one, it was one of the first herbals to be fully illustrated, detailed woodcuts showing the plants as they appeared in nature. This was a significant departure from earlier herbals, which often relied on stylized or symbolic depictions of plants. Fuchs' illustrations were carefully drawn, offering a more accurate representation of the plants that would become essential to the Renaissance herbal revolution. Additionally, Fuchs included detailed information about the plant's medicinal properties based on his own observations and the writings of earlier herbalists. His work was a blend of ancient knowledge and modern experimentation, a perfect representation of the Renaissance's commitment to blending the old with the new. Fuchs' emphasis on direct observation and empirical evidence was part of a broader trend that would come to define the Renaissance's approach to science. Scholars were no longer content to simply rely on ancient texts. They wanted to see for themselves, to test the theories and ideas that had been handed down through generations. This was the beginning of a new kind of herbalism, one that would lay the groundwork for modern botanical science and pharmacology. But Fuchs was not alone in his efforts. Another important figure in the Renaissance herbal revolution was Andreas Vesalius, a Flemish physician and anatomist, who was often considered the founder of modern anatomy. Vesalius' work, particularly his De Humani Corporis Fabrica, revolutionized the way the human body was understood. His groundbreaking dissections of human cadavers provided new insights into the anatomy of the body, and his work laid the foundation for modern medical practice. While Vesalius is primarily known for his contributions to anatomy, his work also had a profound impact on herbalism. Vesalius' detailed study of the human body helped to shape the way herbalists thought about the body's inner workings. He demonstrated that the body was not a mystical or divine entity, but a complex mechanical system that could be understood through observation and experimentation. This shift in perspective helped to move herbalism away from its mystical roots and towards a more scientific approach. Herbalists, inspired by the work of Vesalius and other Renaissance thinkers, began to see themselves as part of a larger scientific project. They were no longer just keepers of ancient knowledge. They were active participants in a growing field of inquiry, working to understand the body and its processes through experimentation and observation. As the Renaissance progressed, the rise of scientific inquiry and the growing emphasis on empirical evidence began to change the way herbal remedies were prepared and administered. Herbalists no longer simply relied on trial and error. They began to document their findings, create detailed records, and develop standardized methods for preparing remedies. The growing interest in anatomy and physiology also encouraged herbalists to think more critically about how their remedies interacted with the body. This new approach to herbalism wasn't just about mixing plants together in the hope that something would work. It was about understanding how and why certain plants had healing properties, and about using that knowledge to create more effective treatments. Historians still debate whether the growing influence of science and the systematic approach to herbalism in the Renaissance truly marked the end of the mystical traditions that had long defined the practice, or whether these two aspects of herbalism continued to coexist. Some argued that the Renaissance marked the beginning of the professionalization of herbalism, while others suggest that it was simply a shift in how herbalism was practiced and understood. Whatever the case, it is clear that the Renaissance laid the groundwork for the scientific study of plants and the development of modern pharmacology. In the next section, we'll explore how this shift from mystical healing to scientific herbalism continued to unfold, particularly as apothecaries began to rise in prominence. These apothecaries, who combined the skills of herbalists with a growing body of scientific knowledge, played a crucial role in shaping the future of herbal medicine and pharmacology. Now, Let's take a step into a world where the quiet revolution in herbalism began to take on a more formalized shape. Imagine the streets of Renaissance Europe once again this time. You're walking through a city known for its thriving medical community where apothecaries, the predecessors to modern pharmacists, are beginning to assert their dominance in the world of healing. As the scientific method continues to influence the world of herbalism, a new kind of healer is emerging. These apothecaries are a blend of herbalist, chemist, and physician practitioners who are trained not just in the lore of ancient remedies, but in the growing body of knowledge that is reshaping the very foundations of medicine. Unlike their predecessors, who worked primarily in humble cottages or monasteries, apothecaries were now starting to occupy proper shops in the bustling marketplaces of Renaissance cities. These were spaces where herbal knowledge and scientific experimentation could coexist. The apothecary's shop was filled with bottles of tinctures, dried herbs, powders, and potions, carefully prepared and labeled according to the growing body of medical knowledge. The apothecary was no longer just a keeper of traditional remedies. He was a practitioner of medicine with a much broader understanding of the body, its ailments, and how plants could be used to treat those ailments. Apothecaries were, in many ways, the natural heirs of the Renaissance herbalists. They'd been trained in the new scientific methods that were revolutionizing the understanding of the human body and its processes. These men and women were the first to really begin blending ancient herbal knowledge with the new discoveries in chemistry and biology. They understood the medicinal properties of plants, but they also sought to understand the mechanisms by which those plants worked in the body. As a result, the apothecary became a key player in the development of modern medicine, combining the knowledge of the past with the growing scientific discoveries of the present. As you step inside one of these apothecary shops, you might notice the difference between this new world and the more informal, folk-based practices of the past. The shelves are neatly organized, and each item is carefully labeled, often with a description of its properties and uses. In the back, you might see an apothecary grinding dried herbs into powders or creating tinctures by steeping herbs in alcohol. The air is thick with the scent of plants. But there's also something new, a sense of order, precision, and professionalism. This is a far cry from the witch's brew style of medicine that was once common in folk traditions. Apothecaries were beginning to treat their craft as an intellectual pursuit, one that required study, experimentation, and above all, an understanding of the science behind the remedies they created. Historians still debate when the apothecary truly emerged as a distinct professional class. But it's clear that by the 16th century, these individuals had begun to separate themselves from the traditional herbalists and folk healers. While the herbalists still played a key role in their local communities, apothecaries were now being trained in universities and medical schools where they learned about the latest developments in medicine and chemistry. They became increasingly involved in the medical establishment, and over time, they began to assume the role of the primary healers in many cities. The rise of the apothecary also marked a significant shift in the way medicines were prepared and administered. Apothecaries were the first to adopt standardized methods for preparing remedies, whereas herbalists in the past had relied on a more intuitive approach, mixing herbs according to tradition and personal. Experienced apothecaries began to develop more systematic ways of creating medicines. They started to measure the dosages more carefully, document the ingredients used, and experiment with new combinations of herbs. This precision marked a turning point in the history of herbalism, as the field began to evolve from folk medicine into a more scientific practice. One of the most significant developments in this period was the emergence of the first pharmacopoeias, written compendiums that listed the medicinal properties of various herbs and other substances. These pharmacopoeias, which were often published by medical institutions or governments, became essential reference tools for apothecaries and physicians alike. They standardized the use of herbal remedies and helped to ensure that medicines were both safe and effective. The publication of these pharmacopoeias marked the beginning of the professionalization of medicine and the formalization of herbalism as a legitimate branch of science. The rise of the apothecaries wasn't without its challenges, however. As they gained prominence, they began to clash with other medical professionals, particularly the traditional physicians who were trained in universities and regarded themselves as the true authorities on medicine. Apothecaries were often seen as lesser practitioners, since they did not have formal medical degrees. This divide between the apothecaries and physicians is still a matter of debate. Among historians, some argue that it was simply a matter of class, with apothecaries being viewed as lower status practitioners, while others suggest that the rift was due to genuine disagreements about the nature of medicine. Historians still debate whether the rise of the apothecaries represented a natural evolution of herbalism, or whether it was simply the beginning of the professionalization of the medical field that gradually marginalized other forms of healing. Some scholars argue that the apothecary was the key figure in the development of modern pharmacology, while others suggest that apothecaries were just part of the larger trend of medical professionalization that came to dominate the Renaissance. What is clear, however, is that the apothecary played a crucial role in transforming herbalism from a practice based largely on tradition and superstition into a more scientific and systematic form of medicine. As the apothecaries began to emerge as dominant figures in the medical field, their role in society began to change. No longer just healers working in isolation, they became part of a growing medical establishment. They collaborated with physicians, scientists, and other medical professionals to further refine the practice of herbal medicine. The apothecary shop became a place where the latest scientific knowledge could be applied to the ancient wisdom of herbalism. Through this collaboration, the foundations of modern pharmacology were laid, and the apothecary became the bridge between ancient herbal traditions and the scientific world of modern medicine. But with the rise of the apothecaries came new challenges. The growing popularity of scientific medicine threatened to marginalize the folk healers and herbalists, who had long been trusted by their communities. These folk healers, often women, continued to practice their craft in rural areas, but they were increasingly seen as outside the bounds of proper medicine. Despite this, they remained a vital part of the herbal landscape, passing down their knowledge through families and small communities. As we move into the next section, we'll explore the rise of exploration and the significant role it played in the expansion of herbalism. European explorers brought new plants back from the Americas, Africa, and Asia. And these plants would go on to influence the practice of herbal medicine for centuries to come. As we embark on the next chapter of this journey, imagine a time when Europe is gripped by the thrill of discovery. It's the age of exploration. The great ships of the European powers are setting sail across the seas, reaching the distant shores of Africa, the Americas, and Asia. The world, once confined to the familiar borders of Europe, is expanding, its mysteries now being uncovered. And with them, new wonders are being discovered. Among these wonders are plants, herbs, and spices. that have never before been seen by Europeanized herbs, with medicinal properties that would soon become an integral part of herbalism and pharmacology. You stand on the shores of a bustling port city, the air thick with the smells of salt water and spices, the docks filled with crates of exotic plants from distant lands. These plants are not just treasures for the spice trade, they are potent medicines, with healing powers that European herbalists have never even dreamed of. The age of exploration has brought Europe into direct contact with new ecosystems, and as European herbalists begin to learn about these plants, they are also beginning to recognize the profound impact they could have on the practice of herbalism. The discovery of new plants and herbs from the Americas, Asia, and Africa represented a seismic shift in the world of herbalism. These plants, often used for centuries by indigenous peoples in their native lands, had properties that were entirely unfamiliar to European herbalists. Some of these herbs were used to treat ailments that European herbal remedies couldn't address. Others offered entirely new ways of thinking about health and healing. And as these plants began to make their way across the globe, it would transform European medicine in ways that were impossible to predict. Historians still argue about the long-term impact of these plants on European herbalism. Some suggest that the influx of new herbs revitalized the field, infusing it with new energy and possibilities. Others argue that the influx of new plants and remedies complicated the practice of herbalism, creating confusion and uncertainty among herbalists who are now tasked with integrating these new herbs into their already complex knowledge systems. But one thing is certain: the plants from the New World began to change the way herbalism was practiced in Europe, and their legacy would live on for centuries to come. Let's take a closer look at some of the plants that came from the Americas and changed the course of herbal history. The most famous of these is cinchona, the bark of a tree native to the Andes Mountains in South America. For centuries, indigenous peoples in the Andes had used the bark of this tree to treat malaria, a disease that plagued Europe. At the time, when Spanish colonists first encountered the indigenous people's use of this plant, they brought it back to Europe, where it quickly became recognized as one of the most effective treatments for malaria. The introduction of cinchona to Europe was a game changer. For centuries, European herbalists had been unable to find a reliable treatment for malaria, a disease that had ravaged the continent for centuries. But cinchona offered a solution, one that was not only effective, but also relatively easy to obtain. The plant's bark contained quinine, a compound that could kill the parasites responsible for malaria. Its introduction into European medicine marked a major breakthrough in the fight against infectious diseases. It became one of the most important herbs in the apothecaries' repertoire. But cinchona was far from the only plant to make an impact on European herbalism. The introduction of tobacco from the Americas also had a profound effect on the practice of herbalism. Indigenous peoples in the Americas had long used tobacco in a variety of ways, from medicinal purposes to spiritual rituals. When the Spanish brought tobacco back to Europe, it quickly became popular not just as a recreational drug, but also as a medicinal herb. In the centuries that followed, tobacco became a staple in European herbal medicine, with apothecaries using it to treat a wide range of ailments, from coughs to digestive issues. Even today, tobacco remains a controversial but ubiquitous part of modern herbal medicine. Although its negative health effects have long since overshadowed its medicinal uses. Meanwhile, plants like maize, potatoes, and tomatoes, which were all domesticated by indigenous peoples in the Americas, were also making their way to Europe. While these plants were not primarily used for medicinal purposes, they had a significant impact on European diets, providing new sources of nutrition and energy. The introduction of these crops revolutionized agriculture in Europe, allowing for the cultivation of new, more resilient crops that could feed growing populations. This in turn contributed to improvements in public health, as better nutrition helped to combat malnutrition and associated diseases. In addition to these well-known plants, European herbalists also began to experiment with other plants from Africa and Asia. The introduction of ginger, turmeric, and cinnamon, all spices used for centuries in traditional medicines, began to reshape European herbalism in profound ways. These spices, which had been used in Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine for millennia, were now being embraced by European herbalists as remedies for digestive issues, inflammation, and more. As trade routes expanded and new connections were made between Europe and the rest of the world, European herbalism became increasingly diverse and interconnected with the broader global exchange of knowledge. Exchange of plants and herbs during the Age of Exploration was not just about the introduction of new remedies, it was also about the exchange of knowledge. As European explorers, traders, and settlers encountered new cultures, they learned from the indigenous peoples about the healing properties of the plants they used. This exchange was often one-sided, with European colonizers extracting knowledge and plants from indigenous cultures without acknowledging their contributions. Nonetheless, the transmission of this knowledge had a profound impact on European herbalism. As new herbs and remedies were integrated into the European pharmacopoeia, this exchange of knowledge also led to the spread of European herbalism to the rest of the world. As European explorers traveled to the Americas, Africa, and Asia, they brought their own herbal traditions with them, sharing their knowledge with the peoples they encountered. In many cases, the exchange was mutually beneficial, both European and indigenous herbalists learning from each other and blending their knowledge in innovative ways. This cross-cultural exchange laid the groundwork for the modern global system of herbal medicine, which draws on knowledge from many different traditions. Historians still debate whether this exchange of herbal knowledge was ultimately beneficial or exploitative. Some argue that the spread of European herbalism to the Americas, Africa, and Asia was a form of colonial domination, where indigenous knowledge was taken without proper credit or compensation. Others suggest that the exchange of knowledge helped to create a more interconnected and diverse system of herbal medicine, one that benefited both European and indigenous peoples. Clear is that the Age of Exploration had a profound impact on the development of herbalism, as it opened up new avenues for the exchange of plants, knowledge, and ideas. In the next section, we will examine the lasting legacy of the Renaissance herbal revolution. As we move into the modern era, we will explore how the transformation of herbalism during this time laid the foundations for the development of modern pharmacology, and how the practice of herbal medicine continues to influence medical practices today. As the Renaissance drew to a close, and the Age of Exploration transitioned into the modern era, the ripple effects of the herbal revolution began to settle in the fabric of European and global medicine. What had started as a quiet, almost secretive practice where knowledge was passed down in whispered tones and often kept within the walls of monasteries or rural homes was now on the brink of being recognized as a legitimate and integral part of scientific medicine. Herbalism had been reshaped, redefined, ultimately elevated through centuries of hands-on experimentation, empirical testing, and cultural exchange. But the final chapter of this quiet revolution was yet to be written. As we move into the 17th and 18th centuries, the legacy of Renaissance herbalism is still alive. But now it's intertwined with the birth of modern pharmacology. At this point, herbalism is no longer a fringe practice. It has become intertwined with formal medical education, medical institutions, and even burgeoning pharmacological industries. European physicians and apothecaries, who had once dismissed herbalism as mere folk knowledge, now saw the immense potential that plants held. The herbal revolution had found its way into the academic sphere and was beginning to shape the way scientists thought about medicine. You can picture the transformation unfolding before your eyes as you step into a laboratory in the late 17th century. The walls are lined with glass bottles and jars, filled with extracts and tinctures, each meticulously labeled. On the workbenches, chemists and herbalists are experimenting, combining plant extracts with other compounds to test their medicinal properties. It's a far cry from the simple herbal preparations of the past. Now, it's about isolating active compounds, testing dosages, and understanding the chemical makeup of plants. The age of empirical science has truly arrived. Historians still argue whether this period marks the true birth of modern pharmacology or whether the roots of pharmacology were planted earlier during the Renaissance. Some suggest that it was the explosion of chemistry and biology in the 17th century that transformed herbalism into the structured science we recognize today. Others contend that the Renaissance's emphasis on experimentation and observation set the groundwork, that the scientific methods applied to herbal remedies during the Enlightenment simply extended what had already begun. Regardless, this period is undeniably crucial in the history of herbalism. It is the time when plants, once revered for their mystical and spiritual properties, were now analyzed and understood through a scientific lens. It was also the moment when herbalism began to transition from being a holistic, personal practice into a commercial industry, where plants were turned into mass-produced pharmaceuticals. The 17th and 18th centuries were marked by the rise of famous chemists and botanists, like Robert Boyle, Joseph Priestley, and Carl Linnaeus, whose work would fundamentally change the way plants were classified and studied. Linnaeus, in particular, is pivotal in the development of the system of taxonomy, the scientific classification of plants and animals. His Systema Naturae, published in 1735, introduced a standardized method of naming and classifying plants. This breakthrough helped scientists and herbalists alike to better understand the relationships between plants and their medicinal properties. Linnaeus' work was instrumental in turning plants into scientific objects of study, offering a precise and systematic way to organize the overwhelming diversity of the plant world. With Linnaeus' taxonomy system in place, it became easier for herbalists to communicate about plants across regions and nations. The system provided a common language for the scientific community, ensuring that every plant was accurately identified and classified. This system of classification would be crucial as the practice of herbalism became more formalized. But Linnaeus was not alone in his quest to systematize nature. His work was part of a larger movement in the Enlightenment to categorize and understand the natural world through reason, logic, and empirical observation. This shift in thinking encouraged the rise of botanists and chemists who systematically examined plants, extracting their active compounds and testing them for efficacy. One of the most significant developments during this time was the isolation and identification of active compounds in medicinal plants. This was the turning point where herbalism began to align with the emerging field of chemistry. You can imagine the excitement of those early chemists as they began to discover the specific chemicals that made plants so powerful. For example, in the early 19th century, morphine was isolated from the opium poppy, a breakthrough that changed the way pain was managed in medicine. Similarly, quinine, the compound from cinchona bark that had been so important in treating malaria, was isolated and studied, opening the door to further research into plant-based medications. It's important to recognize that these developments weren't just about discovering new drugs. They also helped to confirm the value of the long-standing herbal traditions. For centuries, herbalists had relied on cinchona, opium poppies, and other plants to treat ailments. But now, the scientific community was finally able to understand why these plants worked. The active ingredients in these plants, once mysterious, were now identified and understood. This added a new layer of credibility to the herbal practices that had long been dismissed by the medical elite. But with this newfound respect came a new challenge. As herbalism began to merge with chemistry, it also began to professionalize. The once decentralized practice of herbal medicine where knowledge was passed down through families or learned in apprenticeship was now being formalized in universities and laboratories. This process of professionalization was inevitable, but it also had its drawbacks. The rise of chemistry-based herbalism marked the beginning of the decline of traditional herbal practices. The once empowered village herbalists, who had used plants with an intimate understanding of nature, were now increasingly marginalized by a growing medical establishment that prioritized chemistry and standardization. Historians still debate whether this shift from folk herbalism to scientific pharmacology was entirely positive. On one hand, it allowed for greater precision in the use of plant medicines and led to the development of modern drugs. On the other hand, it distanced the practice of herbalism from the people it had originally served. The growing reliance on laboratory-made medicines created a rift between the medical community and the traditional healers, who were often more in tune with local plants and their uses. The scientific model of herbalism began to emphasize the individual active compounds of plants, rather than the whole plant, leading to a more fragmented and mechanistic view of healing. Nonetheless, the impact of the Renaissance herbal revolution continued to resonate. As we moved into the 19th and 20th centuries, the relationship between herbalism and pharmacology evolved further. Many of the plants that had been central to Renaissance herbalism, such as cinchona for malaria, opium poppies for pain relief, and willow bark for fever reduction, would continue to play critical roles in modern medicine. And while modern pharmaceutical drugs would come to dominate, the principles of herbalism continued to shape the way we approach medicine today, especially in the world of alternative and complementary therapies. Herbalism's quiet revolution had far-reaching implications, and its legacy can still be seen in the modern pharmacological industry. Today, pharmaceutical companies continue to study plants and their compounds, leading to the development of countless medications. But beyond the laboratory, there remains a thriving interest in herbalism, with people turning to nature-based remedies for everything from stress relief to immune support. The Renaissance herbalists, with their unassuming, hands-on approach to medicine, laid the groundwork for this modern movement, and their legacy continues to shape the ways in which we understand health, healing, and the power of nature. As we look back on the quiet revolution of the Renaissance herbalists, we see how a small, seemingly unimportant practice grew into a worldwide movement, one that bridged the gap between ancient wisdom and modern science. The work of these early herbalists transformed the field of medicine, and in doing so changed the course of history. Their legacy lives on today, in both the modern pharmaceutical industry and the growing interest in alternative medicine. And while the tools and technologies have changed, the core principle remains the same. Nature holds the key to healing, and with the right knowledge, it has the power to cure. In our next section, we will explore the continuing relevance of Renaissance herbalism in the context of modern times, and how the ancient art of herbal medicine is making a comeback in the 21st century. We will look at the resurgence of interest in natural remedies, and how contemporary herbalists are once again bridging the gap between tradition and science. As we continue to move forward, the influence of Renaissance herbalism remains palpable. Quiet revolutions spanning centuries of trial, error, and scientific inquiry laid the foundation for a future in which herbalism and pharmacology would no longer be seen as separate worlds, but as complementary components of a broader medical tradition. Even today, centuries after the Renaissance, herbalism's legacy continues to shape both the pharmaceutical industry and the growing movement toward alternative medicine. This section will explore how the roots of Renaissance herbalism have persisted, how modern scientists and herbalists are rediscovering ancient practices, and how the global revival of interest in plant-based remedies continues to unfold. You find yourself standing in a vibrant farmer's market in a modern-day European city, surrounded by stalls filled with jars of dried herbs, tinctures, and essential oils. The scene looks remarkably familiar. Plants that were once cultivated and used in the Renaissance are still central to the natural healing practices of today. The flowers of chamomile, the leaves of peppermint, the roots of ginger, these are the same remedies that Renaissance herbalists once used in their work. But what's different now is the way these plants are being studied and utilized. They're not just remedies handed down through generations. They're being tested in modern laboratories, their active compounds isolated, studied, and standardized for contemporary use. The quiet revolution that began during the Renaissance has sparked an entire field of research dedicated to understanding the therapeutic potential of plants. And this field is growing stronger every day. The 21st century has seen a dramatic resurgence in the interest in herbalism. As pharmaceutical drugs have become more prevalent, there has also been a growing skepticism about their side effects, their long-term impact on health, and the rising costs associated with conventional treatments. As a result, many individuals have turned to natural alternatives, seeking out plant-based remedies for everything from digestive issues to chronic pain, anxiety, and sleep disorders. This shift has created a wave of interest in the very practices that Renaissance herbalists once pioneered, reconnecting modern society with the plants and remedies that have been used for millennia. The resurgence of interest in herbalism is not simply a trend at a reflection of a broader cultural shift toward holistic health, sustainability, and self-care. In this new era, herbalism is seen as a path to reclaiming autonomy over one's health. Much like the Renaissance herbalists who experimented with herbs and plants to unlock their healing potential, today's herbalists are blending ancient knowledge with modern scientific methods to understand how plants can be used to promote well-being. Yet as much as herbalism is making a comeback, there is still some debate about its place in modern medicine. While herbal remedies are now widely accepted and respected by many, they still face skepticism from parts of the medical establishment, particularly when compared to pharmaceutical drugs that are subjected to rigorous testing and regulatory oversight. Despite the growing body of research supporting the efficacy of certain plant-based remedies, many practitioners of conventional medicine remain hesitant to fully embrace herbalism as an equal partner to modern pharmaceuticals. Historians and modern practitioners still argue whether herbalism should be integrated more fully into mainstream medicine, or whether it should remain on the periphery as a complementary treatment. One significant factor in the increasing acceptance of herbalism is the scientific research that has been conducted in recent decades. Following the Renaissance, the study of plants took on a more systematic, scientific approach, just as we saw in the work of figures like Linnaeus and Boyle. Modern scientists, including pharmacologists and chemists, have been working to isolate and identify the active compounds in many medicinal plants. Through this research, they've confirmed the effectiveness of some of the very remedies that Renaissance herbalists once used. For example, echinacea, once used by Native Americans and Renaissance herbalists to treat colds and respiratory infections, has been shown in several studies to boost the immune system. Ginseng, a plant with a long history of use in both Western and Eastern medicine, has been found to help improve cognitive function, reduce stress, and boost energy levels. St. John's wort, an herb used since the Middle Ages, has been shown to help treat mild to moderate depression, confirming the centuries-old belief in its medicinal properties. These studies, along with the increasing popularity of herbal remedies, have helped to legitimize herbalism in the eyes of modern science. Today, many herbal remedies are studied and tested using the same rigorous methodologies that are used to test pharmaceutical drugs. This research has led to a deeper understanding of how plants work in the body and how they can be used to treat a variety of ailments. While herbalism is still not fully embraced by all in the medical community, the increasing body of scientific evidence supporting the efficacy of plant-based treatments is slowly changing perceptions. But even as modern scientists continue to explore the scientific basis of herbalism, there is something that still sets it apart from conventional medicine: its holistic approach. Where traditional Western medicine often focuses on treating specific symptoms or diseases, herbalism, rooted in the traditions of the Renaissance, takes a more integrative approach. Herbalists today, much like their Renaissance predecessors, view health as a balance between the body, mind, and spirit. They don't just treat a single symptom. They aim to restore overall harmony within the individual. This philosophy has made herbalism increasingly attractive to those who seek to treat not just their physical ailments, but their emotional and mental well-being as well. In recent years, this holistic approach has gained a more prominent place in public consciousness, particularly as mental health and stress management have become major concerns in modern society. The use of herbs like lavender for relaxation, chamomile for anxiety, and lemon balm for stress is a growing trend. These herbs have been used for centuries, but only now with the backdrop of modern research and a cultural shift towards mindfulness and holistic wellness have their full benefits begun to be appreciated. But let us not forget that this resurgence in herbalism isn't limited to just a handful of herbs. It spans the entire spectrum of plant-based remedies, ranging from the more commonly used herbs to the lesser-known ones rediscovered in the wake of Renaissance herbalism. In the 21st century, the internet has made it easier than ever for individuals to access information about herbal remedies from all over the world. The rise of online herbal communities, blogs, forums has allowed people to share their personal experiences and knowledge about herbalism, creating a global conversation about the benefits and potential drawbacks of plant-based medicine. One key area where Renaissance herbalism is making a comeback is in the field of natural skincare. In a world where beauty and skincare products are often laden with chemicals, many people are turning to herbs for their gentler, more natural properties. Plants like aloe vera, tea tree oil, and rosemary are being used in skincare routines for their soothing, anti-inflammatory, and antibacterial properties. These herbs, which Renaissance herbalists once used for skin ailments, are now at the forefront of a growing industry that emphasizes clean, sustainable, and natural beauty products. As we look toward the future, the quiet revolution that began in the Renaissance is far from over. With each new discovery, each new scientific study, and each new herbal remedy tested, we are continuing the work of those early herbalists who laid the foundation for modern pharmacology and natural medicine. The legacy of the Renaissance herbalists is alive and well, and it is shaping the way we understand health and healing in the modern world. In the next section, we will delve into the lasting impact of Renaissance herbalism on modern pharmacology, and how the integration of plant-based medicine into contemporary healthcare systems is slowly beginning to take shape. We will explore how herbalism continues to be a significant part of the healthcare landscape, and how the synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern science is creating new possibilities for the future of medicine. As we stand on the threshold of the 21st century, looking back at the path that herbalism has carved through history, we begin to see the profound influence of Renaissance herbalists on contemporary medicine. The journey from humble folk healers and monastery-based apothecaries to the development of modern pharmacology has been long and winding, but the core ideas of herbalism, the careful study of plants, the understanding of their medicinal properties, and the integration of this knowledge into healing practices remain at the heart of modern medical exploration. Today, herbalism is experiencing a renaissance of its own, but it is no longer relegated to the margins of society. It is slowly, yet steadily, being incorporated into the broader healthcare landscape. You can imagine yourself in a modern research facility, a sleek, high-tech building where scientists are using advanced technologies to study the very plants that Renaissance herbalists once cherished. The air smells sterile, the hum of machinery fills the background, but there is something oddly familiar about the atmosphere. This place is dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of medicinal plants, just as the Renaissance scholars and apothecaries did centuries ago. The difference is that today's researchers are armed with state-of-the-art equipment that allows them to isolate plant compounds at a molecular level, creating a more precise and scientifically rigorous understanding of how these plants work in the human body. It's no longer just about experimenting with plants in isolation, but about understanding how specific compounds interact with the body's systems, and how they can be harnessed to treat illness in a controlled and systematic way. In many ways, modern pharmacology is a direct descendant of Renaissance herbalism. The foundation for modern drugs, whether synthetic or plant-based, was laid by the work of early herbalists who sought to catalog, experiment, and understand the healing power of nature. Even in the most cutting-edge laboratories today, the tools used by Renaissance herbalists' observation, experimentation, and a deep respect for nature's bounty remain essential. While the methods have evolved, the core principles of herbalism have stood the test of time. One of the most exciting developments in the modern world of herbalism is the growing use of plant-based remedies in conventional medical settings. It is no longer the case that herbal remedies are simply relegated to the realm of alternative or complementary medicine. Today, they are increasingly being used alongside traditional pharmaceutical treatments in integrated healthcare systems. This integration is an acknowledgement that herbalism has much to offer modern medicine, particularly when it comes to treating chronic conditions, managing symptoms, and promoting overall well-being. Take, for example, the growing popularity of cannabis as a medicinal herb. In the past, the use of cannabis was relegated to the fringes of society, associated with recreational use or fringe medical practices. However, in recent years, research has revealed the plant's powerful medicinal properties, particularly in managing pain, anxiety, and nausea. Cannabis is now being embraced as a legitimate therapeutic agent, and its use is being studied extensively in both scientific and clinical settings. The story of cannabis parallels that of many plants discovered or rediscovered during the Renaissance. Plants that were long used for their healing properties but only recognized by mainstream medicine centuries later. Another area where the Renaissance herbal revolution continues to leave its mark is in the growing body of research on herbal supplements. Herbs like turmeric, ginger, and garlic, which have been used for centuries to treat a wide range of ailments, are now being studied for their antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and antimicrobial properties. Modern clinical trials have begun to confirm what Renaissance herbalists and ancient healers intuitively knew. These plants can have a profound impact on health, particularly when it comes to reducing inflammation, supporting the immune system, and promoting overall wellness. But the rise of herbal medicine in the 21st century isn't just about the acceptance of specific plant-based remedies. It's also about a broader shift in how we approach health and healing. As we increasingly embrace integrative medicine, we begin to see a movement away from the narrow focus of symptom management toward a more holistic view of wellness. This shift in thinking mirrors the Renaissance herbalists' approach to health, which was grounded in a belief in the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. In the Renaissance, herbalists didn't just treat a specific symptom or illness. They aimed to restore balance to the entire body. The remedies were designed to strengthen the body's natural defenses, promote vitality, and ensure long-term health, not just to suppress symptoms. Today, this approach is being revived as more people seek out natural ways to support their bodies in maintaining balance and health. Herbalism is once again seen as part of the broader conversation around wellness, self-care, and disease prevention. But it's not just in the research labs or integrative medical clinics where herbalism is gaining ground. The rise of social media and the internet has democratized knowledge, allowing people to share their experiences with herbal medicine in ways that were previously unimaginable. You might find yourself scrolling through Instagram, where wellness influencers and herbalists share their favorite plant-based remedies, recipes, and tips for incorporating herbs into daily life. You can access online forums where people discuss their personal experiences with herbs, exchanging advice on everything from managing anxiety with ashwagandha to using lavender oil to promote restful sleep. This explosion of online herbalism is both a sign of the times and a reflection of the growing interest in plant-based remedies. Modern herbalism is no longer confined to the realm of academic research or niche. Practitioners at becoming a mainstream conversation. People are returning to the roots of their own healing traditions, seeking out natural remedies to complement their modern lifestyles. In many ways, the internet has become the new herbalist's apprentice, with thousands of voices sharing and learning from one another. While this online explosion of herbalism offers many exciting possibilities, it also raises some challenges. With so much information readily available, it can be difficult to know where to turn for credible, reliable guidance. The explosion of interest in herbalism has also led to an increase in wellness trends that may not always be rooted in science. As with any rapidly growing field, there is a need for careful discernment, education, and regulation. The very same curiosity and passion that Renaissance herbalists displayed through their careful documentation, their experimentation, and their willingness to push the boundaries of accepted knowledge must continue to guide today's herbalists and researchers. The integration of herbalism into modern healthcare systems isn't just about adding a few plants to the medicine cabinet. It's about embracing a philosophy that honors the wisdom of the past while embracing the advances of the present. Modern herbalism, like its Renaissance predecessor, is based on observation, experimentation, and the scientific method. It acknowledges the complexity of the human body and the importance of balance, treating not just individual symptoms, but the body as a whole. The future of herbalism is bright. As we continue to study the compounds in plants, isolate their medicinal properties, incorporate them into modern healthcare systems, we can expect even more breakthroughs. The quiet revolution that began in the Renaissance is far from over. With each new discovery, each new plant studied, and each new remedy tested, we are continuing the work of those early herbalists who understood that the body and nature are intertwined in ways we are still learning to comprehend. The legacy of Renaissance herbalism is alive and well, and it continues to shape the future of medicine in profound ways. In the next section, we will reflect on the personal journey of healing that herbalism offers. We will explore how, even in the face of modern medical advancements, the timeless connection to nature and plants remains a powerful force in human health and healing. And we will discuss how herbalism continues to empower individuals to take charge of their health in a world that is increasingly disconnected from the natural world. As we continue our exploration of the lasting influence of Renaissance herbalism, it's important to step back and reflect on something more personal, something that ties this aguiled practice to modern life in a way that resonates deeply within us. It's the recognition that even as we embrace cutting-edge scientific technologies, there is something incredibly powerful and grounding about connecting with nature through plants and herbs. This relationship, which has existed for thousands of years, taps into a timeless human instinct, the desire to heal ourselves using the natural world around us. Imagine standing in the middle of a forest, surrounded by the rustling of leaves, the fresh scent of pine, and the rich, earthy aroma of damp soil. In the distance, you might spot a patch of street johnswort, its vibrant yellow flowers waving in the breeze. Or perhaps you'll catch the delicate scent of lavender from a nearby field. Even in our fast-paced modern world, these plants serve as reminders of the power that lies within nature's own remedies. For the Renaissance herbalists, these plants were not just tools for survival, they were sacred agents of healing, used to restore balance and harmony within the body. Today, we are rediscovering that same sense of reverence for the plants that have been used for generations to heal and restore. In many ways, this shift towards a more holistic and nature-based understanding of health has been accelerated by our increasingly stressful, disconnected lifestyles. With the advent of technology, we've gained unprecedented access to knowledge and convenience. Yet we've also lost touch with the natural rhythms of life. Long hours spent sitting in front of screens, constant exposure to artificial lighting, and the pervasive stress of modern life have led to widespread anxiety, sleep disturbances, and chronic health problems. It's no wonder that many people are seeking solace in nature. looking to plants and herbs to help bring balance and healing to their bodies and minds, just as the Renaissance herbalists once knew that plants could restore balance. Modern herbalists and natural health practitioners are finding that nature has profound healing powers, if we know how to access them. Today, there is a growing movement towards self-care that incorporates herbalism into everyday routines. People are increasingly using herbal remedies for stress relief, immune support, digestive health, and even skincare. What was once regarded as folk medicine is now gaining recognition as an essential component of a balanced approach to health. One of the most compelling aspects of herbalism is its ability to connect us back to our roots both literally and metaphorically. The herbs we use today are the same ones that have been used for centuries. The healing properties of ginger, garlic, peppermint, and turmeric have been well known to herbalists throughout history. But now we are rediscovering these remedies in a world that often feels disconnected from the natural environment. There's something deeply reassuring about knowing that, even in the face of modern medical advances, nature still offers us solutions to many of our ailments. As you consider the resurgence of herbalism in the modern era, you might begin to realize that this return to nature is not just about using plants to heal our bodies. It's also about healing our relationships with the environment. In today's world where industrialization and urbanization have led to the destruction of ecosystems and the depletion of natural resources, many people are beginning to see herbalism as a way to reconnect with the earth and cultivate a more sustainable, conscious lifestyle. Herbalism invites us to take a step back, to slow down, and to reflect on the natural world around us. It encourages us to see the plants not as commodities to be harvested and consumed, but as partners in our health and well-being. This renewed interest in herbalism, particularly in the context of sustainability, reflects a broader cultural shift toward more conscious living. Whether it's choosing organic herbs, supporting local farmers, or growing your own medicinal plants at home, there is an increasing desire to align our health practices with the rhythms of nature. It's not about rejecting pharmaceuticals or traditional medicine, but rather integrating them with the wisdom of herbalism. This holistic approach, which blends the scientific advancements of modern healthcare with the ancient knowledge of plants, offers a more balanced, sustainable approach to health. As we move forward into a future that values both science and nature, we are beginning to embrace the idea that healing is not just about treating symptoms, but about restoring balance to the entire system, body, mind, and spirit. Herbalism's resurgence is also tied to a new emphasis on preventive care. In an era where chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and autoimmune disorders are becoming increasingly common, many people are seeking natural ways to maintain their health before symptoms arise. Herbs like echinacea for immune support, ginger for inflammation, and chamomile for digestive health are being integrated into daily routines as a way to keep the body functioning optimally. This shift toward preventive care mirrors the ancient practices of herbalism, where maintaining harmony and balance was just as important as treating illness. In addition to their preventive properties, many herbs also have powerful therapeutic effects. Take ashwagandha, for instance, an herb that has gained popularity for its adaptogenic properties. Adaptogens are substances that help the body adapt to stress and maintain balance in the face of environmental and emotional pressures. In the Renaissance, healers may not have understood the scientific mechanisms behind stress, but they recognized that certain plants, such as ashwagandha, could help the body restore balance in times of tension. Today, modern science is beginning to unravel the exact mechanisms through which these plants work, confirming the age-old wisdom of herbalism. Similarly, turmeric, long used in traditional medicine for its anti-inflammatory properties, is now widely studied for its potential to combat chronic inflammation, which is thought to contribute to a host of modern ailments. As research continues, we are seeing more and more evidence that plants, once relegated to folk remedies, can play a major role in supporting health, particularly when it comes to conditions that have resisted conventional treatments. But herbalism is not just about the healing of the body, it's about the healing of the spirit and mind as well. The Renaissance herbalists understood that plants weren't just physical remedies, they were also sources of spiritual and emotional well-being. Today, many herbalists and holistic practitioners are rediscovering the psychological benefits of plants, using them to treat mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, and stress. Herbs like lavender, lemon balm, and passion flower are increasingly used for their calming effects, helping to ease the tension and stress of modern life. This recognition of the emotional and spiritual aspects of herbalism brings us back to the Renaissance herbalists, who were not just healers of the body, but also spiritual guides. They understood that health was not simply the absence of disease, but a state of harmony and balance between body, mind, and spirit. This integrated approach to health is gaining more attention in modern wellness practices, as more people seek to heal not just their bodies, but their souls. As we look to the future, the quiet revolution of herbalism continues to unfold. We are witnessing a resurgence of interest in the plants and practices that have been used for centuries, a resurgence that is being shaped by both modern scientific research and ancient wisdom. The Renaissance herbalists set the stage for this new chapter by blending the wisdom of the past with the scientific discoveries of the present. Today, we stand at the intersection of those two worlds, where herbalism is no longer seen as a relic of the past, but as a vital part of the future of medicine and wellness. The legacy of Renaissance herbalism continues to inspire and guide us, reminding us that healing is not just about technology or modern science. It's about reconnecting with the earth and the plants that have been our companions for millennia. As we move forward, let us embrace the knowledge passed down from those early herbalists, while also honoring the advancements of modern science. Together, these two worlds have the power to create a more holistic, sustainable, and balanced approach to health. As we move deeper into the modern landscape of herbalism, it becomes evident that the practice has evolved significantly since its humble, often secretive beginnings in the gardens of medieval monasteries. Yet, despite the advancements in medical science and pharmaceutical treatments, herbalism has not only survived, but thrived in the 21st century. It has found a new place within the modern healthcare system, not merely as a nostalgic nod to ancient practices, but as an essential, dynamic element of contemporary medicine. Imagine stepping into a modern holistic wellness clinic, where the air is fragrant with the scent of essential oils, and shelves are lined with jars of dried herbs and tinctures. Patients are no longer just coming in for pain management or symptom relief, but for an entire approach to healing, one that takes into account the body, mind, and spirit. The tools on the shelves are those that Renaissance herbalists would recognize: dried peppermint leaves, jars of chamomile, and tinctures of echinacea. But now these remedies are being integrated into treatment plans alongside acupuncture, massage therapy, and modern pharmaceuticals. The clinic is a perfect example of the resurgence of herbalism, where ancient knowledge is applied in a modern context to support the health and well-being of individuals. Today's herbalists are no longer operating in isolation or hidden in the shadows. Their work has found a prominent place in the larger medical ecosystem, and it's thanks to a combination of factors: rising dissatisfaction with conventional medicine, greater access to knowledge, and an increasing cultural interest in wellness, that herbalism is enjoying a major resurgence. At the heart of this resurgence is a fundamental shift in how people view their health. More and more, individuals are seeking ways to take control of their health, whether through diet, lifestyle, or alternative therapies like herbalism. This shift is a direct challenge to the pill-for-every-ill mentality that has dominated mainstream medicine for decades. While prescription medications and surgery have their place in modern healthcare, people are increasingly looking for options that not only address symptoms, but also work to restore balance and prevent illness. Herbalism, in many ways, fits perfectly into this philosophy. It's not about treating a disease, but about restoring harmony to the body, mind, and spirit. It's a philosophy that Renaissance herbalists understood intuitively, and one that continues to resonate today. These herbalists, like the modern practitioners of integrative medicine, understood that healing is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It requires an understanding of the whole person, body, mind, and environment, an acknowledgement that health is more than just the absence of disease. One example of this approach can be seen in the growing use of adaptogenic herbs. Adaptogens such as ashwagandha, rhodiola, and holy basil are plants that help the body adapt to stress and support overall resilience. These herbs were long used in traditional medicine, but they have gained new popularity in modern times due to their ability to help people manage chronic stress, fatigue, and burnout conditions that are increasingly common in our fast-paced, high-stress world. Modern science is now catching up to the wisdom of the past as research begins to validate the therapeutic potential of these ancient remedies. Studies are showing that adaptogens not only help balance the body's response to stress, but also improve cognitive function, boost energy, and support immune function. This growing body of research is critical to herbalism's integration into mainstream healthcare. While many people have turned to herbal remedies for centuries, it is only in recent years that these practices have been validated through clinical trials and scientific studies. As herbal remedies are tested and their benefits confirmed by scientific methods, they are becoming increasingly accepted in conventional medical settings. For example, turmeric and its active compound, curcumin, which was once used almost exclusively in traditional Ayurvedic medicine, is now widely recognized for its anti-inflammatory properties. Today, it is used by millions of people worldwide to treat conditions like arthritis, digestive issues, and even as an adjunct in cancer treatment. Along with the rise of adaptogenic herbs, there has also been a renewed interest in the study of plant-based diets. The research on medicinal mushrooms, such as reishi, shiitake, and chaga, has also seen a dramatic increase. These mushrooms, which were once considered little more than folk remedies, are now the focus of scientific studies exploring their immunomodulatory effects, anti-cancer properties, and potential to combat chronic diseases. What Renaissance herbalists once knew through hands-on experience, modern researchers are now confirming with cutting-edge technology. This scientific validation is crucial, but it's not the only factor contributing to the resurgence of herbalism. There's also a cultural shift at play, one that reflects a desire for a deeper connection with nature. In a world where technology, urbanization, and globalization often disconnect us from the natural environment, people are seeking ways to return to the earth. Many are returning to the practices of their ancestors, planting medicinal herb gardens at home, making their own teas and tinctures, and learning about plants that have long been used to support health. It's not just about the plants themselves, it's about the relationship with nature, the understanding that we are part of a greater whole and that nature has the power to heal us. This connection to nature is not just beneficial on a physical level, it also provides profound emotional and spiritual healing. The practice of gardening, for example, has been shown to reduce stress, improve mood, and increase overall feelings of well-being. The act of tending to plants, nurturing them as they grow, and harvesting them for medicine is an act of self-care, one that grounds us in the natural rhythms of life. The quiet revolution of Renaissance herbalism, then, is not just about herbs and remedies, it's about a way of living that encourages mindfulness, connection, and a deep respect for the natural world. In addition to the growing popularity of herbs in personal wellness routines, there is also a movement toward herbalism's integration into public health. In many parts of the world, governments and healthcare systems are beginning to recognize the value of herbal medicine and are working to incorporate it into their public health systems. In China, for example, traditional Chinese medicine, which is based largely on the use of herbs, and acupuncture is practiced alongside conventional Western medicine in hospitals and clinics. Similarly, in Germany, the use of medicinal plants is supported by the government, with many of the country's pharmacies offering herbal remedies alongside prescription medications. This integration of herbalism into public health systems isn't just a passing trend, it reflects a deeper understanding of the need for a more holistic, patient-centered approach to healthcare. As modern medicine continues to advance, many are recognizing that treating the whole person, body, mind, and environment is the key to long-term health and healing. Herbalism, with its deep roots in nature and its focus on balance and prevention, is an essential part of this evolving healthcare model. The resurgence of herbalism has also opened up new opportunities for entrepreneurs and innovators. The demand for natural and organic products has created a thriving market for herbal-based beauty products, supplements, and wellness foods. Herbal skincare lines, using ingredients like aloe vera, lavender, and rosehip oil, have exploded in popularity. Natural health supplements that combine time-tested herbs like ginseng, echinacea, and garlic with modern nutritional science are available on store shelves. And herbal teas and tinctures have become a mainstream offering in supermarkets and health food stores. But with all of this growth comes the need for caution. As herbalism gains in popularity, it is essential to maintain the same rigorous standards of safety and efficacy that have made pharmaceutical medicine so reliable. While herbs have been used for thousands of years, they are not without their risks. Some herbs can interact with prescription medications, and others can be toxic if misused. Therefore, the practice of herbalism must continue to evolve, with an emphasis on proper training, research, and regulation. Modern herbalists, like their Renaissance predecessors, must balance the wisdom of tradition with the rigorous standards of contemporary medicine to ensure the safety and efficacy of plant-based treatments. As we reflect on the path herbalism has taken from the Renaissance to the present, it's clear that this quiet revolution has touched every corner of our lives. From the gardens of the early herbalists to the research labs of modern scientists, from the personal practices of individuals. seeking to improve their health to the integration of herbal remedies into global healthcare systems. The influence of Renaissance herbalism continues to grow. The legacy of these early pioneers is alive today, and their work has paved the way for a future in which plant-based medicine plays an essential role in healing and wellness. In the next section, we will examine how the continuing relationship between herbalism and modern science offers new opportunities for innovation, collaboration, and the healing of both the body and the planet. As we move forward, we will see how the quiet revolution of herbalism can contribute to a more sustainable, equitable, and healthy future. As we continue our journey through the evolving world of herbalism, we arrive at a crucial turning point. The past century has seen an unprecedented growth in the number of people turning to plant-based medicines, looking for alternatives to pharmaceuticals and seeking more natural, holistic ways to heal the body, mind, and spirit. With this surge in interest has come both excitement and caution, as we begin to navigate the delicate balance between the wisdom of ancient herbal traditions and the advances of modern science. How can we integrate these two worlds in a way that is safe, effective, and sustainable? And perhaps more importantly, how can we apply the knowledge we have gained from Renaissance herbalism to not only heal individuals, but to address the broader health challenges facing our planet today? In this section, we delve into the future of herbalism, exploring how the foundations laid by Renaissance herbalists continue to inspire new innovations in the field. We will examine the role of sustainability in modern herbal practices, the growing interest in regenerative agriculture, and how herbalism's holistic approach to health can address some of the pressing environmental and societal issues of our time. The quiet revolution of herbalism, it seems, is not just about healing individuals, it's about healing the planet as well. Imagine standing at the edge of a lush green field, surrounded by rows of medicinal herbs that stretch as far as the eye can see. The plants echinacea, chamomile, peppermint, and lavender, carefully cultivated, their leaves swaying gently in the breeze. This is not just a garden of herbs, it's a model for sustainable agriculture. A vision of how herbalism can not only contribute to human health, but also play a role in the restoration of our planet's ecosystems. As we look toward the future, the idea of sustainability in herbalism is increasingly taking center stage. Sustainability is not a new concept, but in the context of herbalism, it is more important than ever. As the global demand for plant-based remedies continues to rise, so too does the need for responsible cultivation, harvesting, and production. The lessons learned by Renaissance herbalists who cultivated their own gardens and carefully tended to the plants they used for medicine serve as a foundation for today's herbal practices. However, modern herbalists face a challenge that their Renaissance counterparts didn't see: how to meet the growing demand for herbs without depleting natural resources or contributing to environmental degradation. The rise of regenerative agriculture offers a potential solution to this challenge. Unlike conventional farming practices, which often rely on chemical fertilizers and pesticides, regenerative agriculture focuses on building healthy soils, improving biodiversity, and increasing carbon sequestration. It's an approach that aligns closely with the principles of herbalism, which has always emphasized working in harmony with nature. By integrating regenerative agriculture into herbal cultivation, herbalists can ensure that their practices are not only effective for human health, but also beneficial to the environment. One of the key elements of regenerative agriculture is the practice of crop rotation and polyculture, growing multiple types of plants in a single space. This not only helps to prevent soil depletion, but also promotes a healthy ecosystem, with plants supporting each other's growth. In the context of herbalism, this means cultivating a diverse range of medicinal plants, each of which contributes to the overall health of the soil and surrounding environment. Just as Renaissance herbalists relied on a variety of plants to address a wide range of ailments, modern herbalists can embrace polyculture to ensure that the land remains fertile and productive for generations to come. Sustainability in herbalism also means being mindful of the impact that harvesting has on plant populations. Many of the herbs that Renaissance herbalists relied on were wild harvested, and some, like ginseng and golden seal, have become endangered due to overharvesting. As interest in herbal medicine grows, so too does the pressure on wild plant populations. Ethical harvesting practices, including the use of cultivated herbs and the implementation of sustainable harvesting methods, are essential to ensuring that herbalism remains a viable practice for future generations. But sustainability is not just about the plants themselves. It's also about the people who grow, harvest, and create herbal products. Modern herbalism has the potential to empower local communities by creating jobs in sustainable agriculture, local herb processing, and the production of herbal remedies, just as Renaissance herbalists often worked within their communities. Supplying local populations with medicine, modern herbalists can contribute to the revitalization of local economies by supporting small-scale, sustainable farms and herbal production. This shift could help promote both human and environmental health, while creating a more equitable and sustainable system of healthcare. This approach to herbalism, one that embraces sustainability, regenerative agriculture, and local empowerment, has the potential to address some of the most pressing challenges of our time. Climate change, for example, has become one of the greatest threats to global health, impacting everything from food security to the spread of infectious diseases. By promoting sustainable farming practices and supporting the cultivation of medicinal plants, herbalism can play a role in mitigating the effects of climate change while improving health outcomes. Furthermore, the growing interest in plant-based diets and natural remedies can help reduce reliance on factory farming practices and industrial agriculture, which contribute to environmental degradation and the depletion of natural resources. But sustainability in herbalism goes beyond the cultivation of plants. It also extends to the production and consumption of herbal products. Many herbal remedies today are sold in the form of capsules, tinctures, oils, and teas, and the packaging of these products has a significant environmental impact. Modern herbal companies are beginning to explore ways to minimize their environmental footprint, opting for eco-friendly packaging, sustainable sourcing, and ethical production practices. By embracing the principles of sustainability at every stage of the production process, herbal companies can reduce waste, limit the use of harmful chemicals, and ensure that their products contribute positively to both human and environmental health. In addition to its role in sustainability, herbalism's holistic approach to health has the potential to address some of the most pressing public health concerns of our time. Chronic diseases, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity continue to rise at alarming rates, driven by factors such as poor diet, sedentary lifestyles, and environmental toxins. Herbal remedies, when used as part of a comprehensive wellness plan, can help prevent and manage these conditions. For example, herbs like turmeric and ginger have been shown to reduce inflammation, a key contributor to many chronic diseases. Garlic has been linked to improved cardiovascular health, while milk thistle supports liver function. By integrating herbalism into public health initiatives, we can promote prevention and provide individuals with the tools they need to manage their health in a sustainable way. Moreover, the rise of integrative and functional medicine is helping to bridge the gap between traditional herbal practices and modern medicine. This approach emphasizes the importance of treating the root causes of illness, rather than simply addressing symptoms. Herbalism, with its focus on the whole person, fits naturally into this paradigm, offering patients personalized remedies that support long-term health and healing. As more healthcare practitioners embrace integrative approaches, herbalism will continue to play a significant role in the treatment of chronic conditions and in the promotion of overall wellness. At the same time, it's important to recognize that herbalism is not a panacea. While herbs can offer powerful therapeutic benefits, they are most effective when used as part of a comprehensive health plan that includes proper nutrition, exercise, stress management, and, when necessary, conventional medical care. Modern herbalists, like their Renaissance predecessors, must continue to work in collaboration with other healthcare professionals to ensure that their patients receive the best possible care. In the next section, we will explore how the future of herbalism can evolve through collaboration with modern science. As we look ahead, we'll see how the relationship between traditional herbal knowledge and modern scientific advancements holds. The key to unlocking the full potential of herbal medicine in the 21st century by embracing both the wisdom of the past. As we stand at the crossroads of herbalism's long history, looking ahead into the future, we realize that the most exciting possibilities lie in the collaboration between the age-old wisdom of plants and the ever-advancing world of modern science. The quiet revolution that began with the Renaissance herbalists, who mingled the sacred with the scientific, continues to evolve in new and unexpected ways. The current renaissance of herbalism is no longer simply about revisiting the past. It's about integrating that past with the cutting-edge knowledge of the present, creating a future where the art and science of herbalism work in harmony to improve the health of individuals and the planet. The relationship between modern science and herbalism is an evolving story of mutual respect and collaboration. At the heart of this collaboration is the understanding that both fields, when combined, have the potential to unlock the full therapeutic power of plants. Science offers us the tools to explore the biochemical and pharmacological properties of plants in a way that was once unimaginable, allowing us to understand the mechanisms behind their healing properties. At the same time, the wisdom of traditional herbalism brings a holistic perspective, understanding health not merely as the absence of disease, but as the balance and harmony of the body, mind, and spirit. Imagine walking into a state-of-the-art research laboratory, where scientists are collaborating with herbalists, ecologists, pharmacologists to study the medicinal properties of plants. Researchers are isolating the active compounds in well-known herbs like ginger, ginseng, and echinacea, while also exploring lesser-known plants that have been used by indigenous communities for centuries. Through advanced techniques like chromatography and molecular modeling, scientists are able to identify and analyze specific chemical compounds in these plants that are responsible for their therapeutic effects. This is where the wisdom of ancient herbal traditions meets the precision of modern science, enabling researchers to create new medicines and treatments based on plant-based compounds. But this collaboration goes beyond just testing individual compounds. The Renaissance herbalists were masters of understanding the plants in their entirety, how they interacted with one another, and with the human body. Modern herbalists are beginning to embrace this holistic perspective, seeking to understand how herbs work synergistically in the body. Herbal medicine today is shifting away from a reductionist approach that isolates individual compounds, and instead, more attention is being given to the whole plant, its medicinal qualities, the interactions between its components, and its overall effect on human health. This shift is helping to provide a more nuanced understanding of how herbal remedies work, leading to more effective, individualized treatments. As scientific research on herbal medicine continues to grow, one of the key benefits is the increased credibility of plant-based remedies in the medical community. In the past, herbalism was often relegated to the margins of medicine, viewed with suspicion by conventional healthcare practitioners. But now, with more rigorous scientific studies demonstrating the efficacy of herbs, plant-based treatments are gaining recognition as legitimate forms of therapy. The integration of herbalism into medical practice is becoming increasingly common, particularly in fields like oncology, where herbs like turmeric and ashwagandha are being used to complement conventional cancer treatments. Modern science is confirming what Renaissance herbalists instinctively knew. Plants have powerful therapeutic properties that can enhance health and treat disease. This growing recognition of herbalism within the medical community is reflected in the increasing use of plant-based therapies in hospitals and clinics. More doctors are turning to herbal remedies as adjuncts to conventional treatments, especially in the treatment of chronic conditions like arthritis, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Herbal medicine is also being incorporated into wellness programs, where it is used to promote preventive health, manage stress, and boost immunity. This trend reflects a broader shift toward integrative medicine, which seeks to combine the best of conventional medicine with alternative therapies to address the whole person. But the collaboration between herbalism and science is not just about therapeutic treatments. It's also about sustainability. As the demand for plant-based products increases, the need for responsible and sustainable sourcing of medicinal plants becomes even more urgent. The rise of regenerative agriculture, which focuses on practices that restore soil health and biodiversity, is a perfect fit for the future of herbalism. By using sustainable farming techniques, modern herbalists and farmers can ensure that the plants used in herbal remedies are cultivated in a way that benefits both human health and the environment. Regenerative farming not only helps to preserve the land and its ecosystems, but also supports the growth of high-quality medicinal plants that can be used in holistic healing practices. The integration of sustainability into the herbal industry also has the potential to create new economic opportunities. By supporting local farmers and small-scale producers, herbalism can contribute to the revitalization of rural communities and promote economic development in areas that have long been overlooked. This model of localized production, combined with sustainable farming practices, can create a more equitable and resilient system for herbal medicine, one that prioritizes both human health and environmental stewardship. Herbalism's place in modern healthcare is not just about individual treatment. It's also about addressing the larger systemic issues that affect public health. In a world facing rising levels of chronic disease, environmental degradation, and social inequality, herbalism offers a potential path toward healing that is not just focused on curing illness, but on restoring balance and harmony to individuals and society as a whole. As we move forward, we must consider how herbalism can contribute to a more equitable and sustainable healthcare system, one that values prevention, sustainability, and holistic well-being. The future of herbalism is also deeply connected to the growing interest in food as medicine. Just as Renaissance herbalists used the plants in their gardens not only for medicinal purposes, but also for food, modern herbalists are rediscovering the power of food to heal the body. This idea is central to the growing field of functional foods, which includes herbs and plants that can be used to prevent illness and promote long-term health. Herbs like rosemary, thyme, and oregano, which were once used primarily for cooking, are now recognized for their antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and antimicrobial properties. The modern kitchen is becoming a laboratory for healing, as people embrace the idea that the foods they eat can support their health in profound ways. As herbalism continues to gain traction, it is important to recognize that it is not a one-size-fits-all solution. While plants can offer significant health benefits, they must be used wisely and with respect. Modern herbalism embraces the concept of individualized care, understanding that each person's body is unique and requires different treatments. Whether through custom-blended tinctures, herbal teas, or supplements, herbalists today are focusing on personalized care that takes into account a person's specific needs, lifestyle, and health goals. This personalized approach is what makes herbalism so effective. It allows for a holistic, individualized solution to health challenges. As we conclude our journey through the quiet revolution of herbalism, it becomes clear that the legacy of Renaissance herbalists is not confined to the past. Their pioneering work has shaped the future of herbal medicine, guiding us toward a future where science and nature work together to restore balance and promote well-being. The future of herbalism is bright, not just because of its potential to treat illness, but because it offers us a new way of thinking about health, a way that values prevention, sustainability, and harmony with the natural world. In the coming years, we will continue to see herbalism integrated into modern healthcare systems, not just as an alternative therapy, but as a cornerstone of holistic health. As we move forward, let us carry with us the lessons learned from the Renaissance herbalists, who combined ancient wisdom with scientific exploration to create a healing practice that has endured for centuries. The quiet revolution of herbalism, which began in the shadows, is now standing in the light, and its potential to heal, restore, and transform is more powerful than ever.